Friday right here, 3 p.m., Northeast Colorado. We're live from online. It's Friday afternoon. So today we've got some really interesting topics that I'm excited to share with you, but I just want to make sure that, first off the bat, we, are acknowledging the tensions around this. And as we've seen week over week, we all need to lean on each other. And as we navigate the complexities of the COVID crisis, our rural leaders and small business owners are exploring new territory and testing the bonds of public and private relationships. As our communities chart ahead with the reopening strategies, we want to hear from people, from you, the people who are on the ground who have been caught at the intersection of all three crises: the public health that drives our economic crisis, which both have us looming on the edge of mental health crisis. One thing is for certain: the complexity of these three interconnected crises is revealing a lot about our strengths and weaknesses for solving the issues at hand, the overlapping impacts that places lots of people in the crosshairs, from decision makers to small business owners and all of our officials. So moving forward and toward ongoing solutions in coming weeks, we're looking to solve problems, come up with solutions, try to find solutions all together. And really, there's no black and white answers. So we're just here to support one another. So let's go ahead and go to our next slide. And I'd like to, again, as every week, thank our sponsors for this call that we have had with Startup Colorado, the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, the Galala Commons, GrowSeco, the Civic Canopy, the East Colorado SBDC, Telluride Foundation, and the Northwest Colorado SBDC. I'd also like to thank all of our panelists that are on the call, as well as our first speaker, Martine. And I want to make sure to note that we do have a Q&A box that we're encouraging you to type in your questions as we go through this presentation. We will have a Q&A session after Martine, I believe, and then we'll go right into the panelists. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I do want to touch on three events that we have coming up with East Colorado SBDC. And the first one is Who Do You Trust? And this is an event to help build trust as a small business owner with your customers. So Don Overcash will be our presenter for this on May 12th. This will be a webinar. Next slide. Next up, we have Grow with Google, manage your business remotely in times of uncertainty. This will be on May 6th. It's an online live stream from 10 to 11, and you can register on our website. Next slide. And the last one is a startup orientation. So if you know someone who's looking to start a business during this time, we are still here to help those who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs and small business owners. So this course will go over all the ins and outs of opening your own business and how to be a boss. Next slide. This last one before we jump into our first presentation is just a picture of the East Coast team for the Small Business Development Center. And we've got 14 consultants throughout the territory covering 13 counties. And I do want to point out on the screen here is Sammy Lee. She is our newest consultant that we brought on in March. She's bilingual and she's covering Yuma, Kit Carson, and Cheyenne counties. So she is available now, ready to take on more clients. So you can reach out to her if you're in one of those counties by emailing her at Sammy, SAMMY, at eastcoloradosbdc.com. And I'll make sure to put that in the chat box so everyone can see that. Let's go on to our next slide. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Martine Carcassonne. Oh, I'm going to butcher your last name. I'm so sorry. It's Carcassonne.
Carcassonne.
Carcassonne, thank you. So Martine is a professor of communication studies at CSU, the founder and director of Center for Public Deliberation. And he's going to talk to the topic of tackling wicked problems, working to elevate our tough conversations. I turn it over to you, Martine.
All right. Thank you very much, Lisa, and thanks for having me on. To situate my work a little bit, basically, I'm a communication professor at CSU. For about the last 20 years, I've focused on how do we talk about tough issues, particularly from a kind of a practitioner process perspective of how do we design ways to have much better conversations. Clearly, we have lots of different issues and problems that we're dealing with, and COVID, it made its way quickly to the top of that list. But what I focus on is this broader issue, the problem of not being able to have the conversations we need, the polarization, the partisanship, and those type of things. So a lot of my work is how do we build capacity, particularly in local communities, to create the kind of conversations we can have, so then we're actually, we come up with and we support the collaborative actions that are so critical, particularly across public, private, nonprofit lines. So it is great to speak to business owners and business leaders, because I know as I'm working in communities, we need lots of different voices out there kind of coming together. We can't just leave it to the politicians or the journalists. So how do we kind of build this capacity up? About 13 years ago, I started the CSU Center for Public Deliberation. So it serves as a particular resource for the Northern Front Range area. I actually train undergraduate students as facilitators, and we run events for the city, for the school district, community organizations, again, to try to kind of create those conversations that we need. A lot of my work is informed by social psychology and kind of brain science. Really get into, how do our brains want to think, and we see particularly with polarizing issues, and we see COVID starting to get more and more polarized and kind of sparking some of those divisions. Our brains in some ways are wired for that sort of bad conversation. It's wired to be in our tribes and partisanship and talk past each other. But we know more and more about how you can design processes that specifically work to not trigger those parts of our brains and actually bring out some of the best in our brains, which we often see when communities rise up and are resilient and tap into kind of creative problem solving. So that's a lot of the work that I do. I've got about 10 minutes here to kind of share just one particular kind of concept or tool that is kind of the base of my work that seeming kind of more and more important, and we'll apply it a little bit to COVID to hopefully give you some tools here. So if you go to the next slide, I talk a lot about wicked problems as the heart of the work that we do. Big literature out there. You got my email on the first slide if you want anything additional about these concepts. A lot of people talk about wicked problems in terms of a category or a type of problem. But the way I think about it is more in terms of a lens through which to see problems, and really just another tool in your toolkit as you're trying to kind of work across perspectives on tough issues. So I see wicked problems in a sense of if you have a particular issue that people are starting to distrust each other and get angry and talk past each other, what happens if you step back and say, if we look at this as a wicked problem, how does that change the conversation? How does it open up space for us to have different kind of conversations? You can see on the slide the key aspect of wicked problem for me is this notion that they inherently involve these competing underlying values. Wicked problems can't really be solved. They can be managed better or tackled in a way, but they really rely on high quality communication to kind of deal with. But the best way to really explain it is through an example. So the next slide kind of shows an example that we've been working with up here in northern Colorado for quite a while. This is a slide from a process we ran about 7 or 8 years ago, working with the Community Foundation in northern Colorado and the CSU Water Institute. Water is a wicked problem in northern Colorado because we don't get enough of it, right? We're a semi-arid area, and population continues to grow to draw on that water. We learn more and more about the health of the water of the river, and we're probably taking too much water out, and it creates a lot of tensions, and it sparked a lot of bad communication. But for a lot of our issues, I try to create these wicked problem slides, which is really this explicit process of researching an issue, identifying all the other underlying values and interests, and putting them on the table to help people have a different conversation than they would normally have. So this one was developed from a lot of public, surveys and people coming to events and filling out different sheets. And I try to capture in these 9 boxes kind of what I was really hearing from people. And this slide kind of shows wicked problems in a couple different ways. One is if you look at the boxes one at a time, these are all good things, right? This is the heart of wicked problems analysis, is we're trying to make the assumption that the wickedness is in the problem, not the people. The problem isn't bad people with bad values, right? The problem, which is the second aspect of wicked problems, is that while these are all good things, they don't fit together very well. And inherently, if we try to focus on one of those boxes, it's going to be harder to kind of focus on some of the other ones. So the kind of conversations we need to be having in our community is to identify those values, put them on the table, recognize the tensions, and work together to negotiate those tensions better. The problem is we don't do that naturally, right? Most of our dominant conversations, certainly most of the loudest voices in community conversations, tend to either pick one value and frame the issue as just that value, therefore defining anyone who disagrees with them as someone who's rejecting an important value, or, as we see more and more, is strategically defining other people's motives in a negative way. So instead of talking about, say, economic vitality on the top right, they frame it as greed or just caring about money, right? Both of those kind of are very dominant, typical kind of frames that we kind of hear with tough issues, and they both kind of drive us apart and make it harder for us to do the work that we do. You can see on the bottom the kind of conversations we need to spark, which again, don't happen naturally, so we have to be proactive about this, is either kind of the hard prioritization conversation about which of these in this certain situation are more important than others, but doing that in a way that recognizes the trade-offs, recognizes that the values that might not be at the top of the list are still important. So how can we work together to mitigate the impact on those? Or maybe it's a balancing conversation to find, just the right middle ground between some of these values. Or ideally, the best situation is this transcendent conversation where we get creative, we get innovative, and potentially kind of rely on technology to help us kind of transcend the tension. And two things that don't seem to fit together, all of a sudden we find a new way to kind of go beyond that. So next slide, some really quick slides, similar other examples. This is one we did up at Steamboat Springs in terms of trying to develop a local food culture. Next slide. Healthcare is a very complex issue, but in some ways you can capture its wickedness by saying we want those three things, but those three things don't fit together very well. Right? But again, the dominant public conversations tend to pick one or two at a time to frame it in a simpler way. Next slide shows I work a lot with Fort Collins, which sees itself as a triple bottom line city. That means every major policy that goes through the city, that they look at it as what's the impact on the economy, on the environment, and on people. Right? And I like this slide in particular because it gives you a sense of that transcendence that we're looking for. Traditionally, the economy and the environment have been at odds with each other and kind of competing, but something like green jobs transcends that tension. All of a sudden, we're creating jobs, we're creating wealth in a way that's also good for the environment. And we take people who are traditionally adversaries or enemies and make them collaborators. And that's where what we need to do more and more communities is figure out that way of shifting from an adversarial mindset, which brings out the worst in our brain, to a collaborative mindset, which actually taps into some of the best. Next slide kind of takes it a little bit more broad and makes the argument that I'm making a lot, that democracy itself is truly a wicked problem. This is the preamble of the Constitution. The next slide kind of shows that embedded in the preamble are some basic kind of broad values. The next slide kind of translates those values into a little bit more modern language. But you can see on the right side, here are 5 big American values. These are dominant kind of terms that are used often. Once again, it shows you a wicked problem because taking one at a time, these are all good things, right? I think everyone in this call would consider, would prefer justice to injustice. Right? But in reality, these don't fit together very well, right? If you look at the next slide, I do a little exercise often in my class and when I'm giving my talks, when I can pass out the clickers, asking people, if you had to pick one to be most important, what would you pick? And these are very typical responses. I get a broad range that they're all kind of supported. The next slide actually shows a tougher question, which is, if you had to give one up, which one would it be? Right? But I do this exercise to kind of show people that at one and the same time, we all actually have a lot of common ground. We all, in many ways, have the same values. What makes us different is how we rank those values. And those different rankings can be pretty important because, again, the natural tension. So the next slide kind of highlights, with just taking those big 5 American values, there's a lot of just inherent tensions between those. And those are tensions that we're never going to resolve. We're never going to figure out the perfect balance between freedom and equality or freedom and security and some of those things. It has to be kind of an ongoing conversation we have in our communities. And we have to be careful when one value starts dominating too much or one value gets left behind too much, right? The bottom just shows some other tensions that come up a little bit. So go ahead and skip the next slide and go to the last slide. So this slide kind of shows you a little bit of an initial brainstorm, just a starting process. The last couple of weeks as I've been trying to make sense of both COVID and the response to COVID. It's this unique situation where, clearly it's a public health crisis. Clearly it's also an economic crisis. It's going more to be a mental health crisis. But the dominant conversations are now starting to get to the point that people are picking one at a time, framing things in simple ways that you have to believe what I believe, or again, capturing the motives the other side in a negative way, or highlighting people in a far extreme to make it a simple story. But our communities, we need to get beyond that. We need to identify those tensions, put them on the table, recognize the tensions between them, and then figure out how can we work together across public, private, nonprofit lines to work on these shared problems together. So with that kind of real quick introduction, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Lisa to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Martine, and thank you for tackling such a great topic with this wicked problem. We are going to go ahead and go right into our next slide, which showcases our panel that we've got lined up. So right now we are going to cross the topic of navigating the triple crises and understanding our rural strengths. On the panel today, we've got Glenn Slagans, Director of Business Support and Rural Prosperity for Moetis. We have Clark Becker, Director of Rural Workforce Consortium, and we have Mike O'Donnell, Executive Director of Colorado Lending Source. So welcome to the panel. Really excited to have you all on here today. And what we're going to do is we are going to lead the panel with some questions. And remember, those that are here as an attendee, please do utilize the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll get those, hopefully be able to have enough time to answer those as we come through. So first up, the one that we have is what strengths do rural entrepreneurs and communities have that best serve them right now? And then I'll open this up to the whole panel.
Hey, Clark. This is you, Clark. Go for it.
This is me, huh, Mike? All right. Well, there's no pressure there. All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of your afternoon here. I just from a context standpoint, I just would I do get to be the director of the Colorado Rural Workforce Consortium, and I say that because the consortium is one of the 10 federally recognized workforce areas in Colorado. We only cover 51 of Colorado's 64 counties in the consortium. I have 29 workforce centers in 28 different counties, 6 of which are up there in Northeast Colorado with you all there. So we have offices, of course, in Fort Collins and, excuse me, Fort Morgan. There's one in Fort Collins, it's not mine. Sterling, Yuma, Burlington, Lyman, and Kiowa. And so I'm excited to be here. Also, I do want to mention when I look at how I might answer that question of yours and the opportunities, Lisa, is I started in the economic development profession back in 1993. I was also blessed to get to serve in public service for 17 years as a mayor of Woodland Park and a Teller County commissioner. So those life experiences have contributed a lot to how I view things. And, you know, one of the things that when Martine was talking that jumped out at me as I think about this, and Lisa, something you said with one of your upcoming sessions that I would touch on, when we look at the challenges and the opportunities in rural Colorado, the reason I'm so passionate about working in rural Colorado is the incredible resilience and spirit that we find all over rural Colorado, and maybe particularly in eastern Colorado. When you talk about your Google presentation coming up, a story and a mantra that I preach to my team all the time. I don't think they roll their eyes at me when I say it anymore, but back in 2006, 2009, something like that, I was at an Economic Development Council of Colorado conference in Durango. And one of the presentations was, what would Google do? And he related Google's success to the economic development profession. Well, Google does this and economic developers do that. He got about halfway through and he says, Google, they do what they do best and they link to the rest. And you know, the bells went off and bing, ding. That is exactly what we do in the consortium. We can't do it all ourselves. We are a business workforce partnership trying to connect businesses and job seekers. And we get to work with partners like Mike at Colorado Lending Source and help them succeed. And then with Glenn at OEDIT and the many other partners. So that may be a quick introduction that I would offer up there. And then we can get deeper into some of your questions after the other two share a few of their thoughts.
Want to jump in, Glenn?
And Glenn, maybe you can touch on, you know, a little bit about your rural teams and how they're applying these strengths.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that the rural communities, and I mentioned this on the last call, was, you know, the tighter knit communities have a real opportunity here to support the small businesses and just an increased manner, you know, while businesses are being reopened right now. And right now we do have, Lisa, to answer that question, we have rural opportunity representatives within Colorado that are embedded We have our SBDCs. We have 9 rural SBDCs, or small business development centers, which of course Lisa is one of our directors. And we're really working hard, working overtime, just standing up all the resources so businesses can get through this, extend their cash flow, get through this, and then work out whatever they need to work out on the other side with our SBDC consultants and, you know, the area lenders, Colorado Lending Source. And one of the things that's really encouraging is just the way a lot of people have come around the resources and the resources that have been developed to get through this. I had a business in 2008. We lost over 50% of our sales during the crisis, actually lost it within a 24-hour period. And one of the things that happened at that particular time was there was really no programs for us. So I've been just really urging the business owners to, you know, double down, make phone calls, network, reach out to your SBDCs, get on newsletters, because new things are coming every day. And today there's a website called Energize Colorado that was launched today. That's put together by a group of a couple hundred volunteers out of the governor's group on emergency response. And there's going to be a loan fund coming for it. There's going to be all kinds of different resources. The Small Business Development Center Network is a resource on that. So the more work you do on the front end, the more that you can do to really connect with that, the better off you're going to be as an entrepreneur, as a small business person, and the community leaders as well. We're working with EDCC and everybody else on standing up more resources for communities as well.
And Mike here, I'm by way of introduction, Colorado Lending Source, we're a nonprofit organization, a mission-based organization whose focus is really provide better access to capital for the small businesses who need it. A lot of my passion is really with the rural communities, and echoing, you know, what Glenn says, the rural communities in some respects are a lot more cohesive than the metro communities. And so that actually gives them a little bit of an edge up, I feel, because we've seen, you know, some initiatives come out of the rural communities that perhaps we haven't been able to see in the large metro areas. I'm out on the Eastern Plains in the bottom part of Yuma County. And so I'm really excited about creating more opportunities for communities on the Eastern Plains. And we're in the process of just finalizing an opportunity for us to create a fairly substantial sort of loan program, you know, small emergency monies to complement or augment what you can or can't get under the SBA, the Small Business Administration programs, or some of these other programs that the state is looking at or private sector individuals are creating. So our little fund is just called the Emergency Small Business Rural Colorado Loan Fund, and it's just a $10,000 loan, fairly easy to get, you know, a 2-year repayment, no payments for 6 months, 3% interest rate. So it's not as good as free money, which the Paycheck Protection Program has the ability to provide to you, but it could help supplement or augment that. And if you're waiting for a disaster assistance loan, I mean, it could help you keep going until that comes through as well. So there are lots of resources. As I said, some communities are creating some amazing funds. You know, on the other side of the mountains, I had a discussion a few days ago with some people in a council of governments group who are trying to create a special new loan fund for the Northwest 5 counties. There's all sorts of initiatives, and we're actually seeing, you know, foundations step up to help small businesses in our community like we've never seen them before, as well as, you know, banks and private sector individuals. The first time ever this week, I had a call from someone representing a high net worth individual, whatever that means, and he was interested in helping his client invest in one of the loan funds that is popping up around the state. So we're seeing people actually step up to really help, and that's what I really like about Colorado, and that's really what I like about rural communities, because rural communities have always been about helping each other, and now we're seeing it more on a statewide perspective, which is great.
Thank you so much. Great feedback, you guys. The next one, I'm going to have Glenn kick us off, just because I know a little bit of his backstory here. In your personal experience, what have you overcome in the past that supports your thinking now? What gives you hope? And inside that hope, what do you imagine is possible?
So I'm going to go back to, I had one of the business I owned for 20 years. I was actually at the helm from 1991 till 2010. And that business was actually started in 1974, and it still goes on today. And after 9/11, we experienced a really bad economic downturn. And then after 2008, we experienced a worse economic downturn. And, you know, one of the things is that pulling together with the resources that we have now, in 2008, we didn't for a small business have loan funds or PPP or anything to take advantage of. I hate to say it, but in 2008, when I was a business owner, I didn't know the SBDC was around to help me out. So using your resources and having the resources that come that are around this right now with the different loan funds, the SBA support, the work that Mike is doing at Colorado Lending Source, and just the level of community support. There was a story here a couple days ago, and there was a I can't remember the particulars, but there was a business basically, and the landlord was, you know, going to evict the business, and a bunch of people that frequented the business just kept sending it money, and they were able to get on for another month. And that's one of the things that's really encouraging. But from my lens, I actually sat down just after we helped with get the EIDL loan program stood up for the state, and I said, what would I have told myself, you know, 12 years ago when this happened, if I could have, and 15 years ago, 17 years ago when I experienced this for the first time. And you know, a few things came to mind. I always did a really good job as a business owner managing my cash flow. So I knew down to the penny where I stood every day. And I was able to use that cash flow to run different scenarios going forward. And it's critical to do that. The other thing is too, is I understood my market, my business model. But, you know, there's this new thing out, and it's the new normal, and there's going to be a new normal value proposition for your company. Get to that equation sooner rather than later. Try to figure that out. What is your new normal value proposition, and get ready to pivot, right? But the one overarching thing that I really want to say, and we've alluded to this today, is you're not in this alone. When I was a business owner and went through those, one of the key components that I had that I was able to go through them is I had a lot of resources and I used to call these three guys that would advise me on all my big decisions. My three wise men. Surround yourself with people that, you know, call your SBDC consultant, surround yourself with people that know what's going on and can help and offer value to you and your business. And that's really what's going to make your business shine into the future. Because you know, 2 years from now, let's just look back at this and say, yeah, we got through it, but let's really roll up our sleeves, get together as a team or through it as a team. And that's what is happening right now.
Great, thanks, Glenn. Clark and Mike, anything to add on to that, maybe from your personal experiences?
You know, I'll just chime in and say that from a personal standpoint, back in my day as a Teller County Commissioner, I was also the director of Teller County Economic Development Council at the same time. And in 2002, the Hayman Fire came through my county, burning 25% of our county up, 138,000 acre fire. Talk about devastation. I won't talk about it too much because I still get emotional thinking about it today. But working with the emergency response, working with our small businesses, trying to fight through that. And I think, frankly, that pales in comparison to what we're experiencing today in so many of our communities. And I think the real key to success in our, certainly in our Eastern Colorado communities, but I think anywhere in rural Colorado, will be the small businesses. And when I say small, if most of our truly rural communities, if you've got 25 employees, you're a major employer in that community and you're important to them. And it's things like what Mike just talked about and the tools that he has, the access to capital that will help our small businesses survive this and be able to prosper and flourish as we go forward. So that life experience that I had, Lisa, was a powerful one that stays with me every single day.
And I will just add, just at the back end too, that I've been at Colorado Lending Source now for almost 20 years. This is my third recession. Each one of them has been increasingly worse than the one before. And in my lifetime, this is my second plague. So I've been through a lot, but again, I'll throw out a word that we might have used already, which is resiliency. And that's what that's why Colorado is one of the most entrepreneurial states in the nation, and why, to be honest, I settled here, because it's such a collaborative, friendly, all pitch in and try and help each other type state that you won't see on the coast. And so, you know, resiliency is what's really going to build us out. The economy looked different after the dot-com bubble. The economy here looked different after the Great Recession. And the economy here will look a little different after this current one we're going through. but it will still be there, and there'll still be lots of opportunities for entrepreneurs to be successful and to disrupt and to really grow opportunities for them and their families and their communities to create wealth that they may not have otherwise had access to as an employee of a big company. So, you know, the entrepreneurial spirit is still alive and well in Colorado, and we'll get through this, and we'll just have to get through it as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Yes, that entrepreneurial spirit sure is alive in Eastern Colorado, I can tell you that. The next question we have on the agenda here is, what key problems are your teams working on solving in the arena of recovery, policy and advocacy, and funding?
I'm happy to chime in first. This is Clark, if I can. I will, the big things that we're working on right now, my staff, I have, as I said, I had 29 offices, and all of our offices, for the most part, are working remotely. And we're a business-focused workforce partnership. So our key is to support businesses. And I preach all the time, this is the economic developer in me talking, that if business isn't hiring, there's nothing we can do to help a job seeker. So the success of business has to be one of our the highest priority for what we do. However, right now, the majority of our time is assisting the unemployment insurance division, who is way overwhelmed in what they do. And so as soon as we can get them to stand up on their own, our team out in Northeastern Colorado is going to be able to do the things we do best. And that is to partner with you, Lisa, and your businesses where they need help, and help them find those quality, because we're going to have a lot of people looking for jobs and need to retool. I think businesses need to retool, need to think differently. Glenn talked about the transitions and how he did that with his own businesses. And then also, I think our local governments need to think differently about how they do business and how they support our local businesses. The second stage companies that 99 employees or fewer are typically what people think of with a second stage employee. Those are the majority of the jobs in our country, certainly in Colorado. So those are the real opportunities and the challenges that I think we face that we're working on in our workforce system and our partners.
And from an advocacy standpoint, Mike here, you know, I'm a little annoying to our congressional team. So we do have Representative Crow, who sits on the Small Business Committee, two other Congressmen, Perlmutter and Tipton, who sit on the Financial Services Committee, and then our two senators, and a whole Colorado delegation is very pro-small business. And again, we've got a pro-small business governor, have for a while now. And so that all helps us, you know, try and influence or nudge policy so that it's actually more accessible and more favorable to the small businesses. So, and I know there's some calls that I'm on Monday with our delegation in DC as they work on the next version of relief and assistance and recovery to help small businesses. But again, we've got, people aren't waiting for that. We've got, again, the Energize Colorado launch today. We've got other programs that will probably be rolled out next week. And that's really, you know, exciting for people if they can just hang on a little longer.
Yeah, and Lisa, as you know, you were part of working as a Small Business Development Center network, is standing up the entire network in about a week just to be virtual and be on virtual platforms and have all of our consultants have that ability. Moved really quickly on that. The team did a great job, again, with the Minority Business Office as well. The other thing is, you know, we're digging deeper on the resources and the tools, because we really feel this virtual environment's going to be with us for a while, and we can definitely leverage it into the future. Once our classrooms do open back up, there's still going to be a lot of people that, you know, migrate to virtual workplaces, and it's going to be a lot more accepted. It's just going to accelerate that. You know, from a policy standpoint, there's been a lot of people reaching out to me. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of folks, and just making myself available to really help them to understand what a business owner is thinking and feeling at these times. And we have SBDC directors that have, you know, received disaster loans for their businesses before. We've had SBDC directors and directors of business support and rural prosperity that have gone through bank workouts before. So the experience in the network is there, the experience in the team is there. And like Mike said, we've got a governor that's very entrepreneurial focused and is an entrepreneur. And as the state, we're working together on a lot of programs and a lot of different things to support the communities and come together The other thing that Mike said is you don't get it on the coast. My business was in Michigan, and it's like night and day right now to compare my experiences now being in Colorado and just to see the way these communities come together. It's been a really great experience from that standpoint that I wish we didn't have to go through, but I think we're going to come out of this stronger, more cohesive. I think that we're going to have a great, recovery within this entire thing. But at the same time, we're there. And like I said before, don't go through this alone. Please reach out to whoever you need to try to figure out how to get through this thing. And, as businesses are starting to open up.
Absolutely. And, as we wrap up today's session, I'd like to give each one of you some time. If you have something you'd like to share, you have a timely update that you want to share today and what those may be. And Mike, we're going to toss the baton to you first, and then we'll open it up for Clark and Glenn if there's anything else you'd like to share.
Cool. And the Paycheck Protection Program, that federal program that the SBA is rolling out through lenders across the nation, is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for businesses and nonprofits to access. We participated in the first round of Paycheck Protection. We were able to get much more support because we're a nonprofit. We don't have deposits like banks and can't work with Treasury to borrow cheap money. But we've been able to work with a bunch of different individual foundations who've been able to lend us money for us to then relend out of the Paycheck Protection Program. So if anyone is looking for access to that program and they've had a challenge, we are still trying to process as many loans as we can. And you can go to our website, which is our special COVID website, info.coloradolendingsource.org, and you'll be able to see an application link to apply for that. The Paycheck Protection Program is a great program, but they've taken a while to roll out some of the rules. So only just 3 days ago, they really clarified that farmers, ranchers, and producers can access the program. And so you, using a Schedule H, can apply for a Paycheck Protection loan. And there's a size limit for farmers, but really it's really, you can't be bigger than $15 million in tangible net worth or have average net profit after taxes of $5 million. So pretty much most farmers on the Eastern Plains ought to be able to access the Paycheck Protection Program and take advantage of that. And then the other thing that I know Lisa seeded me a question earlier is that the initial iteration of the Paycheck Protection Program had regulations around how seasonal workers could apply for the program. And it said that the seasonal worker had to use as a base an 8-week period between the middle of February and the end of June last year to apply for the Paycheck Protection Loan. They again just clarified that in the last few days, saying that you can use any 8-week period really from May through the end of September, because they finally woke up that a lot of seasonal businesses are indeed summer businesses like camps and things like that. So now they've opened the door to more businesses trying to be accessing the program, and all the way down from a small church in a rural community could apply, all the way up to a fairly large company, although the SBA will audit any of these loans now over $2 million, which is going to discourage a lot of the big businesses from now trying to game this system. So it's open to sole proprietors, independent contractors, small nonprofits, big nonprofits, as well as small businesses all over the Eastern Plains. And if you haven't applied, you should, because you'd be silly not to. But back to that. Back to you, Lisa. Sorry. I get wound up.
Thank you. And Glenn and Clark, any other updates that you'd like to share?
I want to just add one thing and echo what I said earlier is, there's really a few key things as a business owner is, understanding the cash flow, understanding your business model, how it's going to change, not going it alone. The other thing too is take a look at your employees and the people that are around you, that you employ. They might come back and you might have reduced sales for a little while, but you've got to be really attentive to them because that's your team. That's how your business got to this point, was the people that you employ. And, as a business owner, you look at that and, a lot of people ask, well, why are you in business? And a lot of that answer is to really put together a mechanism to provide for a lot of people. And, take a look at an employee ownership model. Maybe you might not be able to give raises in the future, but employee ownership is a great way to, retain and engage and reward your employees going forward, because you're going to need them. And, if you're shut down right now and looking at opening up, I know you're communicating with them, but at the same time, if you're just shut down at this particular time, communicate with them. They're going through this as well. The triple crisis, that part of the mental health crisis that's evolving out of this whole thing, that affects your employees too. So realize that as you put your arms around your community and you use your resources and you go ahead and network and you rely on each other, get your employees in that mix too. A lot of the problems that I had as a business owner, I can't say problems, just challenges, I would take them to my teams and they would come up with great entrepreneurial creative ideas to get us through to the next, to the next base. And that's something that I think is really important right now.
Great point, Glenn.
Lisa, if I could, I would like to just close here with a story that I shared in the other session that seemed to resonate. And when Mike talks about his advocacy with Congress and those representatives, I work real hard to advocate across and knowing what's going on in rural Colorado. I told a story that it was back in 2004 or 5, I think. United Airlines was teasing the state of Colorado about bringing their corporate headquarters to Denver, greater Denver area, front page of every paper in the state, 3,500 employees. And it was just, everybody was so excited about it. About that time, a bus manufacturing plant in Lamar, Colorado, Neoplan, closed down, losing 350 jobs. And I got to thinking about that impact and how it correlates to those big jobs they thought in Denver. And I did some simple math and came up that impact to Prowers County was comparable to the greater Denver area at the time, losing 46,000 jobs. Now, to relate that to Eastern Colorado, a few years ago, Don Robards, my director up in Eastern, and I were up meeting with the Julesburg Town Council. And I was talking to them in a similar conversation, great community looking to try to figure out what to do. And I simply said to the mayor, I said, the economic impact comparable to Julesburg would be like 4 new jobs in Julesburg. And he said to me, really, how will that help me? And I said, you mean to tell me if I moved my business to Julesburg and hired 3 people, that wouldn't help your bottom line? Oh, so it's really about understanding that entrepreneur, the smaller businesses and how vital they are to each of our communities. So keep the chin up and keep fighting. And we got a lot of great resources to help your communities. Thank you.
That's right. I like how we end on that note. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And I once again want to thank our panelists, Glenn, Clark, and Mike, for sharing their thoughts on all of these topics. And I would like to remind all of our attendees that the slides from today's presentation can be downloaded on the eastcoloradosbdc.com/disaster relief website. And for more resources, you can visit the Colorado SBDC state website at coloradosbdc.org/COVID, and that's getting updated by the day with new resources and tools available for small business owners and entrepreneurs. And the last resource I want to touch on is really related to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial communities, and that's Startup Colorado. They've been a wonderful partner for us at East Co SBDC and really a huge help in organizing these calls for us each week. To access the call and the recordings or to listen to other topics across all 4 regions, next slide, you can go to the YouTube channel for Choose Colorado. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, I'd encourage you to contact Startup Colorado at colorado.edu or email them with other topics that you'd like to hear for next week's call, Friday at 3 p.m., every Friday right here. And just so you know, there are some other regions that are having calls on Fridays, and we discuss different topics of interest that we find would be helpful for the territories. So Southwest has one at 12, Northwest at 1, Southeast at 2, and yours truly, Northeast at 3 p.m. So let's go to the next slide. So this is our final slide for today. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and our presenter, Martine, for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us. Hope to see you all next Friday, 3 p.m. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of it.
Thanks, Lisa.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.